Hey crafty people, welcome back to my channel, and in case you're new here, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. I do paper crafting, card making, junk journaling, and mixed media art. Let's get crafting! It's June, so that means I need to make a birthday card and a Father's Day card for my dad. So, for one of the two, I haven't decided which yet, I'm going to start with this piece that we created for the last Technique Time video. I'll leave a link down in the description box for this video on how I created this background. And I've pulled out Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous stamp set. It's the Professor CMS 373, and sorry about glare, but plastic, light, it's gonna happen. And I think what I am gonna do is I wanna stamp the light bulbs, the Professor, I think I want this circle, I haven't decided for sure yet. So that's what I'm going to start by doing. And I think I want to stamp the Professor on some coffee dyed paper. Let's see if I've got some handy. You know what? And I also have the new Curiosity Shop CMS 482, and that's got some light bulbs in it. I think I may stamp those as well, so we can have a variety of light bulbs and sizes. But again, I need to find first some coffee dyed paper. All right, so I found a piece of wrinkly coffee dyed paper that I'm going to use to stamp the Professor on, and probably the circle. I also went into my acetate folder to grab some acetate because I wanted to stamp the leaves on acetate, and I found a piece already alcohol inked because I figured I'll stamp on one side and then ink the other, and I already have a piece done, so that makes life a little bit easier. So we're going to use that scrap for stamping the light bulbs. I'm going to pull over my Misty because this is wrinkly and I want to get a good impression. I'm going to use that. Now you, of course, do not need a stamping platform, but it does really help with ensuring you can get a good impression of whatever you're stamping, especially if you are stamping with dye-based ink, because they tend to pool on the stamps and don't stamp as well. And let me remember, because it's a thicker stamp, to take the foam mat out of the Misty to make life easier. And of course, as soon as I start recording, my dog wants to go out. So let's get this stamp, and then I will let him out. And I think I'm going to use Archival Ink in Ground Espresso. And hopefully you're not getting too much of a glare from the Misty. But let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to grab a little homemade tool for helping apply even pressure to my stamp. Oh yeah, that definitely needs more stamping. This paper may not have been the best choice. I may have to grab another piece of paper and try again with a different paper, because that's some really wrinkly stamp in there. Let's get some more pressure going on so that we can hopefully get a better impression. All right, that's better. Probably going to do one more in the hopes that I get it all the way smoothed out, and then go let a dog out. Clearly should have ironed this paper first. So I'm putting a lot of pressure on to hopefully smooth out the wrinkly spots and get a good impression of the Professor. I like the color of the background, but I do not like how wrinkly he is. Like, you can't see his face very well. All right, I am gonna go let a dog out and see if I can get some better paper for doing this, because yeah, that's just not working for me. Maybe what I need to do is just flatten out the paper better. I'm gonna let a dog out. I'm gonna have a bit of a think. I'll be back. All right, I've just gone ahead and grabbed another piece of coffee dyed paper, because as much as I like this, that's just not working for me. So let's go ahead and try this again, and we should get a good impression this time, because this is not all kinds of wrinkly. All right, we're gonna stamp him one more time. I think I want to do one more, there's a few skippity bits, as Tim Holtz would say, that I don't love on a stamp of a person. There we go. That works. I like that. And since it's archival ink, if I want to get all this staining off, I'm going to have to take this to my sink and give it a good cleaning with some soap, and still may not get all the staining off, but I'm not really bothered by the staining. It's not a big deal. All right, let's pull out the circle and stamp it. And we're going to stamp on the same paper. And again, using the Archival ground espresso. That's good. I'm happy with that. That I can leave like that. Now I'm going to pull over my piece of inky acetate, stick it down, and I'm gonna try ground espresso. I don't know how well the archival inks do on stamping on acetate. I usually go with StazOn, because if you want your ink to dry, you want a solvent-based ink, and I believe Archival is a it's a waterproof acid-free dye ink. We are gonna give this a try and see how it goes. Otherwise, I will pull out my StazOn, which is pretty much, I only have StazOn for stamping on acetate. Like, that's the only time I use it. So we're gonna see. It stamps fine. And let's put a piece of plain paper back there so we can actually see. So it's stamped good, but I don't know how well it's going to dry. That's the big thing with acetate, is how long and whether or not the ink you stamp with is going to dry. So I'm gonna give that a minute, come back and test it to see if it's gonna smudge, and then we will stamp the rest of the light bulbs with the archival ink, or if not, we will pull out StazOn and do that. All right, I've left this sit for a few minutes and we're gonna see if it smudges. Yes, with effort. So I'm inclined to think it will be okay, and that what I may just need to do is take off any excess ink. So yeah, I did get smudging, but it was just a matter of I should have left it dry a little bit longer. I think the archival is going to work okay on this. So let's stamp the rest of our light bulbs. I'm just going to try and position it so it gets some of that interesting inky background. And yeah, it's smudgy a little bit, but I'm okay with that because it's not that noticeable. The problem's going to be is we're going to have to let this sit and dry longer. And while ordinarily you could use your heat tool to dry ink, doing that with acetate is just going to melt your acetate. So I am going to just leave these guys sit for a good long while. That one's definitely smudgier than the other two were, but still, I'm okay with it. All right, I'm gonna set this aside and let them dry completely. And then fussy cut them out. So we're gonna work on some other stuff while this is drying. All right, so while off camera, I went ahead and die cut a hole in the front of our piece, which we're gonna have our professor peeking out of. And I had stamped this thinking I'd put it around, but it's the exact same size as our hole. So what I'm gonna do is fussy cut out the professor, fussy cut out the circle, and possibly, no, I'm probably gonna leave that. And then we're gonna put the professor with his head inside the circle, I think. We're gonna see how it goes and decide if we like it. But I probably should have just done that before coming back on camera, but I did not think of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do my fussy cutting, and then I'll be back, and hopefully our light bulbs will be dry and we can do full assembly. Okay, so I gave my light bulbs a good long while to dry, and I'm still noticing some smudginess when I fussy cut them out. So I'm gonna say I would not recommend Archival for stamping on acetate. You're far better off with StazOn. That being said, StazOn takes a while to dry too, so it may be that I just didn't let it dry long enough. But if all you've got is Archival, it will work. You're just gonna have to be careful and not touch it very much. Also, my original plan was to just put them on without putting anything under the bulbs. As you can see, it completely and utterly disappears. So what I did was I used my Barely Art glue to glue them on to scrap pieces of white cardstock, and I just put some at like the base of the bulb where there was more ink, and so it's loose at the light bulb spot. And so we're just gonna leave that to dry for a second because we got more stuff to do with the base before we attach the light bulbs anyway. So I figured might as well show you that and set that aside, and then we can work on this. So my plan is I'm gonna put the stamp circle inside my big circle. I'm gonna put my inventor dude in, but they kind of blend together. So we are gonna pull out our distress inks and have a bit of a play. And because I stamped this with Archival, it's not going to bleed at all when I add some wet inks to it. So I'm gonna start with some Salvage Patina. I'm gonna grab a block and put the ink on a block. Just smushing some ink onto the block, which you can't really see, but it's there. And then I'm gonna give it a little spritz with water. And then essentially stamp that on to my paper. And then I'm gonna grab my heat tool and dry it. A bit of, let's go with the Scorched Timber Distress Oxide because it's a little bit lighter than the Scorched Timber Distress ink. I'm gonna do basically the same thing, put a little on a block, spritz the block with some water, and stamp the block onto my paper. I'm trying to be judicious in the application, and I'm not even touching it to the page. Oy. And again, gonna heat that to dry it. And then last but not least, I'm going to take some Uncharted Mariner. This time, instead of pressing the block to the paper, I am going to grab my little splatter brush and splatter it on. And I'm going to take a towel and just do that. And wipe off my mat that I splattered ink on before I get it all over the place. And so now when I put my professor on the piece, he does not blend in as much anymore. I'm also going to grab some Scorched Timber Distress Oxide, because that's what I got out, and ink around the edges of my professor. Okay, What else did I want to do? I want to ink around the hole I cut out and probably add a little bit more glue, just because I don't know where exactly I put glue on this the last time when I created the piece, and so there's some spots that are definitely pulling up because I don't think I intended to die cut this piece, so I didn't make sure that there was adhesive everywhere. I think that's glued down now. I'm gonna scorched timber around the inside edge of my circle just to get rid of any white that might be showing from having cut this out, and you know, I put this on white cardstock, so all right. So we're gonna start assembling this. This piece is 5.5 by 4 1/4. So I've cut a piece of cardstock, letter size cardstock, in half to 5.5 by 8.5, which when folded in half gives me 5.5 by 4 1/4 for my card front or for my card base. Now I want to glue down my circle first. So what I'm going to do is draw a circle on the piece and glue this down. And let's decide which way we want it turned round. I think I like it that way. So I'm gonna add glue down here. I'm also gonna take my piece and make sure I run glue along the edge just to make sure we've got it glued down well. Now, I'm using art glitter glue. You can use whatever glue you prefer for this. I think I decided I liked it to go in kind of like this. So I'm gonna place it down, use my bone folder to kind of smooth it out because it got a little wrinkly when I added the inks to it. Probably should have used barely art glue because that would give me more wiggle time. Because, yeah, not exactly centered there. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take some scorched timber distress oxide and run it along the edge here. So that should disguise the fact that I didn't line it up perfectly. So when we bring this back over, that works. Come around this way too. Now next is we're going to place our professor in. And so let's glue him down. Now let's add this piece. Then our light bulbs are going to go over here, but I cut out, I stamped four, but I'm probably only going to use 3 because odd numbers are more visually appealing. So let me just cut this out and we can figure out our layout of our light bulbs. Want to see something? I will be right back. Okay, so I feel like it needs something on the top layer where the circle is. So I pulled out, it's Vault Watch Gears 666603 by Sizzix and Tim Holtz. And I held it up. I took the die and I held it up over here and went, you know what? It is gonna work. And then I'm gonna have the light bulbs hanging down from the top of the pocket watch. But it cuts this out, and there's another piece that will cut out, but I don't think it's big enough for the opening. Yeah, it's gonna be too small of a die. So I pulled out the same die I used to cut the original hole, and I'm just gonna line that up on here and cut it out. So we have a very thin pocket watch. I'm gonna use a little tape when I run it through just to make sure it does not shift while I am cutting, since I have a very small margin of error for here. So I'm gonna go do that and I'll be back. Great, so I've die cut that out, and it's a very, very thin frame that will go around. And I think that's absolutely perfect for that. And we'll do that. But as I'm looking at it, I'm going, I feel like this needs something. I know, I'm being very, very finicky. Hold on, let's take a look again. This happens sometimes with a project. You start, you have an idea, you start playing around and you go, it needs something. Really feel like it needs to be embossed, that it needs the added texture. So I think that is what I'm gonna do, is I'm gonna run it through and emboss it. Actually, what I'm gonna do is grab my embossing plate. What I'm gonna do is I am going to put my embossing folder on my desk. I am gonna put my piece on, and I'm gonna take one of these tools and basically try to get it to emboss without running it through, because I'm worried about how this is gonna hold up. I probably should have embossed before I cut the center out. You see, I'm kind of getting, don't know how well you can see. So I am getting the texture that I want on there. So yeah, I'm just gonna go around and put in some texture. Back before I had my die cutting machine, this is many, many moons ago, Fiskar actually made a tool for embossing with, they did like plates instead of folders. And I had that, and it was basically a little tool similar in shape to this with like a bunch of little balls on it, and you basically did this. It took forever and was a pain in the neck, which is why I didn't use it all that often. But if you don't have an embossing machine and you have a little stylus, you can hand emboss things. It's just kind of a pain in the neck. And because I'm like shifting this around because it's such a small, delicate piece, I'm not getting like a perfect image of the thing, but really I just wanted to add some texture, and I think I may grab just a couple alcohol inks real quick and add a little bit of the same color as I've got going on the background piece to this. So let's put a piece of paper down. So I'm just gonna grab a little patina and mushroom and just add a little bit real quick. So yeah, it didn't add a ton of color, I just wanted to add a little bit more than just a straight up metallic cardstock. So now I am gonna go ahead and attach this on. Yeah, I think that works a little bit better than it did. Although now I'm feeling like the edges need ink. Okay, let's go ahead and glue this down. And I'm gonna use my Barely Art because it gives me a little bit more wiggle room, and I think I'm probably gonna end up sticking it down in the wrong spot the first time around. just have a feeling that that might be a possibility. And then we're gonna wanna move it to make sure it fits on the page. Now, as I do this, I'm thinking, I'm like, I should have used one of the pieces of like the cracked windows acetate pieces from the Halloween release by Tim Holtz inside here, and it is too late for that now. But that is an idea. You could add a piece of acetate, you could alcohol ink it or leave it clear inside to add another bit of interest to this piece. But yeah, having glued everything down already, it's too late to do that. So let's get the placement of our light bulbs going. Oh, and I do want to ink the edges on the light bulbs. While it's not going to stick to the acetate, it will catch on the paper that's underneath. So I'm hoping that'll give us less white on the edges. And I grabbed from my stash, I've got copper chain that I am going to use because I don't want my light bulbs floating off in space essentially. So I am going to put pieces of copper chain on. If you don't have chain to use on your card, or you're planning on mailing it and don't want to put that kind of bulk, which will wreak havoc when you attempt to mail it, you could use hemp cord, thread, you could draw lines, you could go without putting anything on there. Like, I'm just doing this because I don't want them just kind of hanging out there, and so I'm just going to have the pieces of chain go from light bulb to the handle on the pocket watch. I do need to grab pliers. I've got a ring for opening jump rings, which I have found not as useful as one would think, because half the time the jump ring doesn't fit in the little slots on the ring. So it's actually kind of useless half the time. Ah, there, it's got a bigger slot on the other side. I didn't even notice that. All right, so I'm gonna put a piece, I'm gonna grab the pliers because that'll make this a lot easier. I am going to find where it's split. Place it in the ring and then twist. And then I can take the pieces I want off the chain. And then I can go back, because I'm using the 3 here, and close it up if I put it in properly. Sorry if it's not 100% clear on screen, but it's kind of hard for me to see this. All right, let's try this again. So that closed up the loop, and I can put this guy on like so. Kind of wishing I hadn't put this whole thing down on the card base right now, because I'm sitting here thinking, you know what would be good? To put maybe a brad to have them dangling down from on here, which I think I may go ahead and do, because here's the thing. I can always cut this off the base and put it on a new card base so that I can hide the brads. Yeah, that's what I'm probably gonna do. All right, I'm gonna grab a brad. All right, so I've got a brad. What I think I'm gonna do is pick a spot on the watch chain, do a hole, if this one will reach over far enough. It will not. I do have another hole punch. Okay, so I've got a 1/16 hole punch. I am going to punch a hole there, because I think that's a good spot for our brad to go in. And then we're gonna have our chains all dangle from the brad. So that they don't look like they're just hanging out in empty space, if that makes sense. So it's, you know, attached in some way. So that will be our first light bulb. We'll get that chain. I think what I'm gonna do, yeah, this is one of those, I had an idea in my head and then started playing around with it, and it's now evolving as we go. So I'm gonna put a hole in the light bulb and attach it onto the chain. So again, let's pull over the ring. We're gonna open it, put the light bulb on, close it, and so it's gonna hang with the brad going through the chain, and it'll hang like that. And I will probably put like a little tack of glue behind the light bulbs just to keep them from moving around too much, mostly because they're white on the back, so I don't want them like flipping, so that you can see the white on the back. All right, so let's get some idea of where this chain is gonna go. So let's start by putting the hole in the top. Let's go ahead and do the hole in the top of this one. So we're done poking holes. And grab the end of our chain. It up, pop our light bulb on. Probably should have poked that hole up a little higher. It should be fine once I close it. It's just going to be, you know, I'm going to grab another set of pliers. I think it'll be easier to close like this, because yeah, it's going to be enough room once it's closed, but closing it was getting to be a little fiddly. So let's decide where that's gonna hang. That's gonna hang here. We're gonna need this guy. So let's open up the next one above it. Take that off. Put this guy on. Close that. Then we can Drape our second light bulb on. Just kind of want it to stay in place so I can gauge the length of the chain I'm gonna need for the last bulb, which is gonna hang all the way down here. So we're gonna open this one up. And here, let me do this one up close so you can see exactly how it is that I'm opening it. So there's a little split in the jump ring. I'm gonna slot it into the ring I'm wearing, twist them apart from each other, and slide this off, and then the same twisting move to close it back up. You do not want to, when you're opening jump rings, pull outward because that weakens the ring if you do it that way. And you're more likely to end up snapping your jump ring, so you don't want to do that. All right, so let's put all of our little bulbs on the brad, and then we can fiddle with their placement on the card once our brad is secured in place. Because I think what I want is to have the chains going more to the front. Thinking I should have put another piece of chain on that one. It would have sat better. And I think I may just trim this off a little bit since it's hanging over the edge, just to make life easier. Still hanging over. All right. So yeah, definitely need to tack them down so that they don't do that, because that's unattractive. All right, so I think I like this kind of placement. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set this down. I'm gonna grab my art glitter glue, and I'm just gonna put a little glue underneath and press him in place. This one, I'm gonna do the same thing for this guy. Put a little glue on the back side of the bulb. Right, I don't need to put a ton on because I'm not using it to attach the bulb to the piece since it's attached by the chain, but just to keep it from flipping over. And I'm gonna trim that bit off just because it's hanging off the edge, because I made the chain a little too long and I don't want to have it kind of that delicate of a little piece hanging off the bottom of the card, especially since there's a pretty good chance my father's going to put it up on a dining room table or the buffet in his dining room, kind of like that. So having the little thing stick off the bottom, not a great idea. Now, I'm not big into adding sentiments to the front of my cards, but this would be a perfect spot to add a Happy Father's Day, Happy Birthday, whatever type of sentiment right there. I'm going to leave it alone because, as I said, I'm not big on adding sentiments to the front of my card. I'm also not that bothered by the brad feet sticking out on the inside, so I may just leave it and go with it like that. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting.